Hello and welcome to the IDTANA Storytellers. The IDTANA Archival Committee has been tasked with capturing the stories of some of our most influential members over the years. Our committee's goal is to gather these stories to benefit our organization's teachers, families, and dancers, and to preserve North American Irish dance history for generations to come, honoring those who came before us and ensuring their names are not lost for those who come after us.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to this very special interview with a longtime friend of mine who holds court on the far western coast of the United States. I'd like to introduce you to the fabulous, well-known, famous singer and dancer, Annie McBride. Welcome, Annie.
Thank
So
you,
tell
Russell.
me, Annie McBride, where were you born? What was the family like? Tell us about your very early history as a wee girl.
All right. Well, I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, to my parents who are both from County Mayo, the west of Ireland, Achill Island to be exact. And they met and married in Scotland, and the family was raised there. So that's the reason I was taken to Irish dancing, naturally.
No, what brought them from the Achill Island to Glasgow? Was it work or?
Work, looking for work, yeah.
Sure. And what were your parents' names?
My mother's maiden name was Bridget O'Malley, and my father's name was James Horan, Horan.
Were there brothers and sisters, or were you the only wee child?
Oh no. I was number 8 of 10. 6 of us lived to adulthood. So my mother actually had 10 children, but 6 of us lived to adulthood.
What was life like in Glasgow for a little wee lass like you prior to Irish dancing? What was the fun? What was the excitement? What did you do?
Well, dancing was really my recreation my whole life.
Why am I not surprised?
As I went to school in Glasgow, they gave us even Scottish dancing as curriculum in the schools, so I had a bit of that. And of course, a lot of my pals were Scottish dancers, and sometimes I'd go to the Scottish country dancing with them. But once I got old enough to go to dances, I was at classes, not classes every night in the week, but I was at dancing every night in the week for, the social scene.
Mhm.
Inviting the girls to dance. And then, of course, we had the Cayleys on Sunday, and we had 2 days a week we went to Peggy O'Neill for Irish dancing lessons.
So that's where you started with your traditional Irish dancing, was with
Right.
Peggy O'Neill, is that right?
O'Neill, I stayed with Peggy O'Neill all my life in Glasgow. Then when I immigrated, I thought I was done with Irish dancing. And I came over here, and Maureen Hall had preceded me, and she had
Sure.
my sister was here, and my sister had made friends with these other people from Cork, who she made it clear that I was coming over, and they called Maureen Hall, and Maureen Hall called me up, and she
So there
recruited.
you go. So
And
can we drop back for just a minute? Tell me a little bit about what it was like taking dancing lessons from Mrs. O'Neill. I mean, I obviously knew Peggy. I met her myself, and I know her daughter Lorraine. What were the classes like? Was there a lot of people in class?
was
What
a
kind
lot
of
of classes, and I have to say she was a great teacher, and she had a lot of students, and she had a little system, like on Sunday at 1 o'clock in St. Mungo Hall, you had to come in for Irish dancing, and you'd stay there all day. If you knew enough dances, you could stay there all day, and she'd run it into a Cayley at 9 o'clock at night.
Oh
And
my goodness, wow.
who
Yeah.
didn't do the step dancing. But during the step dancing classes, she always had live music, and each week it would be a different musician. So we learned to dance to the fiddle and to the bodhrán and to the Yulin pipes and to the accordion, of course. And
Wow.
she had somebody, and I guess she hired them for the day. So we always had music going, and then she would she just had her method of teaching. Sometimes I think I should have adopted it, but her method of teaching, everybody now that knows the first reel will come on the floor, and she'd make you get up. She wouldn't let you sit around the walls not dancing if you knew a dance. And then she'd say, anybody now that doesn't know that much, come on up, and she would teach it to them. And then she'd call the next dance, and and if you knew 5 reels, you had to dance the 5 reels. And if you knew 5 light jigs, you had to do, although she didn't have that many steps in the light jig, she did the traditional stuff, and that was that.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
very, very good. And I danced it. I was a beginner going into Irish dancing, and Francis Teese and all of them were in that class, you know.
Oh my goodness! Wow, yeah.
Of course, they didn't come in at the same time as us. They came in.
Sure, sure. Now, were there other teachers in Glasgow at that time? I know, obviously, you were with Peggy, but my understanding was that there were other teachers in Glasgow at the same time.
There was only 2 total, and that was Peggy O'Neill and Charlie Kelly.
Ah, yeah. I've heard lots about Charlie Kelly. I've never had no prior knowledge of him, but I've learned a lot about him from Owen Macaulay and some of the others. Yeah.
James McLaughlin, as you know, whom you know, James McLaughlin took from Peggy O'Neill, but his wife Kathleen took from Charlie Kelly.
I see. Okay. So some of the marriages combined two traditions. Now, when you were a young kid learning the dances and so forth, obviously you went to the Cayleys, and it sounds to me, not surprisingly, that you loved the Cayleys. I had a feeling you'd be up on the floor perpetually.
I loved the Cayleys, always loved the Cayleys, because it was I had ambitions enough to learn that I wanted to dance, but my choice was the partners and the friendships and all of that. I like
all the people you meet while you're moving up and down the progressive dance or whatever. Now, what at that time were there feshes going on in Glasgow? Did you participate as a competitor?
I did. It's a bit of a story. Peggy O'Neill asked my mother to let me go in to the feshes. Mm-hmm. And my mother said, no. She said, Annie's only here for her own pleasure. She's not here to get into it. But what my mother wouldn't have told her, that she couldn't afford all the costuming and all of that.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
We had a little membership card to get into the Peggy O'Neill class. You know, you had to give your shilling to her husband, who was at the door, and you'd give your membership card and get it stamped before you could get into the hall.
I see.
Membership card. So you were a member of the school, then there was that. So then she wanted me to go to the fesh. And then my mother said, no, Annie's only here to learn for her own pleasure. But my mother wouldn't tell her that we had the saffron kilts and the white peasant blouses and the vests and all of that. So finally, I guess Peggy didn't give up on my mother. She said, well, if I let her wear a little green dress with a sailor collar and all of that, would you agree to letting her dance? So I danced in the Glasgow Fesh, and I recalled when I went up. So that justified the whole thing.
It made it worth the while, right? Exactly. Did you regularly participate in feshes then from then on?
No, I don't remember doing too many feshes. And of course, it wasn't like today that there was the big competitions like the Scottish Nationals or the Worlds or anything like that. It was all the Glasgow Fesh was the big thing. And then sometimes she would take us down to England, and we would dance down there, and that was what was his name? Kavanagh?
Ted Kavanagh, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
His school was operating in England, and they'd interact sometimes, and the Kavanaghs would come up to Glasgow. And,
very good.
And they did take us to Dublin.
Ah, very good. That was quite a trip then, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but remember, I was very young, so I don't know how many of them I actually went to and didn't go to. Sure. But I figure that my mother took me to Irish dancing in 1947, I think.
1947, wow.
I think, because I was born in 1939, and I was born in 1939, and I left in 1959, and I was 19 by that time. So I think 1947, I probably danced all the way through through the 50s. So
you would have been about 80 years of age when you started, give or take.
I would have been 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, so that's a little like myself. I didn't start dancing until I was 10. And it was just kind of a strange event that happened, but it's amazing how quickly you can become embroiled in it, isn't it? Once you're in, you're in.
Well, it's something you either love it or you don't. And
absolutely.
My mother took my sisters too, but they none of them. But my youngest sister, who's still alive, she says to me, I often wish I'd kept it going.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now you said that Peggy, as far as the school costume, they had like saffron kilts and things like that. Was that her standard costume?
The girls had the same kilt, mm-hmm. But the boys had the tweed jacket, of course, and the broth.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the girls, instead of a jacket, the girls had a white peasant blouse and it had a green vest.
Right.
No,
D-
like a little bolero type
Like a
thing.
bolero vest. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
Because
a,
I actually, when Peggy was teaching here in the United States, her boys still wore the saffron kilts and the tweed
yeah.
jackets. Now
Mhm.
they'd moved to a different dress, and with a jacket, and it was white and black and a variety of other things. But yeah, and as far as the dance shoes, was it traditional gillies or was it other kinds of shoes? What did you wear?
To have what well we used to call them pumps, we didn't call them ballet slippers or gillies or anything like that. We called them pumps, and they were more or less like the less expensive ballet shoe, the one with the one little strap going
Right,
across.
of course. Yeah, you get it at the shoe store. Yeah.
And then when we started doing the hard shoe, it was a black patent shoe is what we had, and it just had a leather sole. It had no toe pieces or heel pieces
Hmm.
or anything on it at the time, and it had a buckle and a button to keep it closed.
Wow.
I think I have that pair of shoes, but I have a later pair of shoes. But I have a pair of shoes that are like 60 years old, I'm sure.
Good heavens. Wow, that's great. So now you said that you kept dancing until you were up into your late teens, and then
Mhm.
then and
I
pr-
graduated.
prompted you to emigrate to the United States?
Well, mainly, well, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but my two sisters were married to my husband's two brothers, and I
Oh my
was
goodness. Wow.
a little girl, and I was in their family. But it was my husband who wasn't my husband then, and his brother and my sister. They're the ones that made the decision to come to
I,
the United States. Eddie came in '56, and Paddy and Brady came in '57, and then they encouraged me to come. That's how I ended up coming
and did they come directly to San Francisco or was it somewhere else first?
directly to San Francisco. They lived in Oakland until they bought houses, and at that time they bought a house in Pinole, and they've had a house in Concord.
And what was the attraction for San Francisco? Was there a particular reason for San Francisco?
With relatives sponsoring them that had already come like 48, 49. Just they had an opportunity to get sponsored and come. So
Well,
I,
and I
I
know
think
that
that's the decision.
and I know that there was a historically very strong Irish uh, community in San Francisco
There
who had
isn't
done quite a few things with the Irish Center and all that kind of good stuff. So there were places for them to socialize and get together and all that kind of experience.
most of the Irish couples in San Francisco met at the what we called the KRB Irish Dance Hall, but that was called the Knights of the Red Branch, and we all called it the KRB. It was Saturday
KRB, right?
night go out to dance. And that's what a lot of the couples met and married, in San Francisco. But the first thing, if somebody invited you to dance, the first thing they asked you was, where did you come from and when did you come over? You know, that,
Have to get a little bit of history there as far as that goes. So you said that when you came over, you kind of figured that the dancing was over and done with. You had left it behind in Glasgow. And so
I
you arrived what did you arrive in San Francisco to do? Were you working or?
whole thing is I came over, I was 19 and my sister was here and she had a baby and she was expecting another one. And I just thought, well, I would like to go to work and see what it was like out here. I had no idea I was even going to stay. And my mother had said to me, what's 2 years out of your young life if you don't like it? You have an opportunity to go see it. And if you don't like it, hopefully your dad and I will be here and you can come back again. So that I
Absolutely, sure.
with the careless attitude, like if I didn't like it, I didn't have to stay. Yeah.
It was an experiment. Absolutely. So how did the experiment go? Did you like it?
At first I would have gone back. I I felt I was robbed of my independence, and I suppose I missed my dancing and my social life because we would go out to social dances every night in the week.
Hmm.
And it was your whole social life. And then I worked in Glasgow and I was independent. But when I came over here, I had no job and I had to stay in with my sister and brother-in-law, and I just felt like my independence was gone. But
Sure.
then I got a job, and then Eddie kept saying to me, you'll feel better and you'll feel a lot better about the whole thing if you get a job and you get going. So he was right, but it took a few months for me to decide I was going to stay. We got married 2 years later, and the rest is history.
Absolutely, sure. And tell me about your husband. Where was he from?
Donegal.
From
He,
Donegal.
he was from a town called Downings outside of Letterkenny.
Very good. And what brought him to San Francisco? Work as well?
Mainly his cousins kind of encouraged him to come over. I think Eddie would have liked to have gone to Australia, and I think he felt like this would be a stepping stone for him. And when everybody started piling on, he stayed, and that was that. He became a
That,
plumber.
that was the end of that. So now you mentioned that um, sort of by the luck of the draw kind of thing. Somehow Maureen Hall and some others got into your life and changed it a bit as well, I think, from what you said.
For her exact words, she called me up and she says, Annie, and I said yes. And of course, my name wasn't McBride then. I hadn't been married. I wasn't married to Eddie. I was Anne Horn, right? So she says to me, "This is Maureen McTaggart from Cork. And I understand you danced in the old country." And I said, "Yeah, I did." "And who did you dance for?" I said, "I danced for Peggy O'Neill." And she said, "Well, oh, I know Peggy very well." She said, "I tell you that my husband and I and my family were now living," and she was in a little town called Firebar, which was down outside of Fresno. And said, "I want to open a dancing class up in San Francisco, and I would like to have you come on board with me." Because I was 19 going on 20 then.
Sure.
So I said, "Well," she says, "well, I would just, and I can only come up once a week." And da, da, da. So then that's how she recruited me. And she had me as a senior dancer in her class for a while. And then I would keep the class going while she went back to Fresno.
Sure. So it was the opening of a new class in San Francisco that really got you back into the game, as it were. Excellent. Yeah. When Maureen contacted you, were there other dance classes already in existence in San Francisco? I assume they were.
I was just going to tell you that there was 2 existing schools at that time, and that was 1959 going into 60. And that was the Kennellys, John and Maureen and Anne Healy.
Right. And they had been teaching for a while, I'm assuming.
Long time.
Sure.
A long time. Anne Healy's father taught ahead of her. And I never met her father, but he taught in San Francisco for years and years and years. And he was from Cork.
So he had a Cork tradition as far as that goes. And the Kennellys, where do you know where they were from originally?
John Kennelly is from Kerry, for sure. And Maureen was born in San Francisco.
I see. Okay.
Her dancing name was Cooney, Maureen Cooney.
Yeah. Okay. And wasn't John also involved in the music scene here as well?
No, but he had a lot of really good musicians that were involved with his dancing class and friends.
I see. Okay.
Like Kevin Keegan was one, and there's quite a lot of them. Joe Cooley, he used to be in San Francisco. There was he was always associated with movies, but I don't think he played it. But Patricia, his daughter, did.
And she still does quite well, actually. Yeah, she does, and rather enjoys it every once in a while.
Oh, she's very good, and I convinced her one time to, when the first Worlds was held in Glasgow, she took the accordion over and we went up to a pub called Sharky's, and she did a session up there.
Oh, cool. Very good. Excellent.
Yeah, she's very good.
When you started teaching with Maureen Hall, obviously the class that was called the McTaggart School, or whatever, were there places like the Cayleys, like you used to have in Glasgow? Were there places that you could go and socialize and do all the Cayley dances and all the fun stuff?
The KRB Hall was about the height of it, and we'd go there, but it would be a bit of everything. It'd be like, you get up and it would be a waltz, Irish waltzing, or there was all kinds of things. And they did do the Cayley dances as well.
Oh, cool. And what about feshes? Were there any feshes happening in the San Francisco area?
First fesh we participated in was called the Gaelic League Fesh in 1960. That was the first one held in San Francisco, to my knowledge.
And
I don't know if feshes ahead of me, but I'm not sure.
Do you remember any of the people that were involved in the Gaelic League at that point?
Yes, I
Who,
remember the lady who was really instrumental in the Gaelic League, keeping it going. Her name was Anne Quilter, and she was from.
I actually know Ann Quilter as well. I participated in one of the Gaelic League feshes by submitting an essay and winning a prize
Yeah,
a good
okay.
few years ago. She was
And
into everything.
she was, and fair play to her. A fesh was a fesh. You could enter you could enter the song contest, you could enter the music contest, you could enter the dancing. She did run her syllabus that it was all things Irish if you were talented in
Now,
any way.
was this an indoor fesh or an outdoor fesh or a combination?
Indoors. The only outdoor fishes that we had up north, now I say that because Southern California had a lot of outdoor fishes, but they had a lot of the weather to suit it too. You know, San Francisco didn't exactly have the same weather. But the indoor fishes, we've been around San Francisco in different parts of the city. We didn't always have a cultural center. We didn't always have St. Mary's convention centers. We used to dance in like a Lone Mountain College, and I bet you would have been there judging probably at one time. And they just and where else did we danced in a place on number 9 Jones Street. It was around the corner. I think it was I want to say St. Bonaventure's, but I'm not sure that I'm right. But it was a church hall anyway. I know that.
Sure.
So we were indoors.
Now, let me ask you this. So you're now working with Maureen Hall. At what point do you decide, or does she decide for you, that you're going to get your TCRG? How did that come to pass?
Well, here's the story. Nobody had their TCRG except for Maureen Hall, but there was another lady here ahead of Maureen Hall, and she kind of kept quiet. But her married name was Annie Tully. No, sorry, Annie Slattery, and that's how everybody knew her. But in Dublin, Ireland, she was Annie Tully, who had danced in Ireland, done her TCRG in Ireland before she ever immigrated. So she actually immigrated before Maureen, and she ran, but by this time she's married and she's running the Slattery School of Irish Dancing. And she ran it on my side of the bay, which was Alameda.
I see. So how did you wind up getting into the TCRG then?
So I got into the TCRG because Maureen Maureen was a member of the commission and she was coming out, and Maureen actually was judging. She judged the very first fish we had out here at one of the colleges, and in our first Oireachtas was held in a high school called Bishop O'Dowd High School. The story behind that is Maureen she encouraged everybody to go into the fish, of course. And there was a guy by the name of John Hooley who ran an Irish, he wanted to start an Irish centre. And he had an Irish newspaper, and he had a radio program going for the Irish. And of course, now the Irish dancing was getting started. So the commission offered to hold the test for the teachers who were already operating in San Francisco.
I see.
And Maureen Hall says to me, and that was October 67. I remember that well. So she says to me, Annie, now you get ready now and take this test. And I said, of course, I started rebelling. Maureen, I am not ready to do that. And I'm getting married and I'm going to have children. Annie, the test is coming to you. You don't even have to go to the test. It's the first time the test has ever been held outside of Ireland. She said, I'll get you ready. I had no, she came and picked me up and took me to the test.
I'm sure she did.
So the 5 of us took it at the same time in San Francisco. And it was John and Maureen Kennelly, Anne Healy, Annie McBride, and Mary Jo Murphy.
All right. Okay.
And we all took our test, and that was definitely October 1967.
Okay. And did you all get the TCRG?
We all got it.
Very good. So that was the beginning of the process, so to speak.
And Well, the president of the commission that time was the first president of the commission, McGinley. What was
Cormac
he?
McGinley, right?
McGinley. And not only did he do the test, he played the fiddle for the music. It was something. So
And the music was with live accompaniment on music as well. And then there was the Cayley paper. It's the usual test that we know today.
no test, and they didn't let us know anything about how we did, how we didn't do. That we did the usual parts of the test, and he took it all back to Ireland, and he said that they would bring it to the commission and the board, and they'd all decide. They'd grade the papers, of course.
Sure.
This and that, and so we didn't know for some time. So I can tell you this, and I don't know if you want to broadcast this or not, but we paid $25 to take that test. $25.
$25. It's
still
not
have
that
to-
much anymore, Annie.
I know, but I every once in a while I tell Eileen, I say to her, I don't know that I would have been able to afford to take it nowadays,
Well, exactly. And even in those days, $25 was a pretty steep price to pay for a test. Let's face it. There wasn't a whole lot of money floating around, I'm sure.
I know.
All right. So did getting your TCRG make any difference as far as the teaching, or was it pretty much the same as it had always been?
Bill danced for Maureen, and Maureen wanted to put me into the first freshman in San Francisco as a senior lady, right? And I was in all the teams. But Ann Quilter wouldn't let me, because Ann Quilter said I was Annie McBride by this time, I suppose, by the time I took the test. And she said, Annie's a teacher. And Maureen said, no, she's not. She's not a register. You can't keep her out. And then, but the word was out. I was helping in Maureen's class.
Sure.
So Anne wouldn't let me do. So being me, I went to Maureen and crying practically, and said to her, please, Maureen, I don't want to be in the middle of this controversy. It's not important to me. I don't need to go and compete. So you will do the figures for me, won't you? And I said, oh, okay, I'll do the figures. So Ann Quilter agreed that she would let me go into the figure dancing, because Maureen had told her that she could get permission from Ireland, that I was not a registered teacher and they couldn't keep me out. So
Maureen knew how to negotiate things, didn't she?
But I will say I learned an awful lot from her, and she was great.
That was going to be my next question. So you're working with Maureen Hall, Maureen McTaggart was obviously a very special experience. What sorts of things did you learn from her? What was the experience like?
Well, I have to say I learned. I mean, she prepared me to become a teacher. I mean, with Peggy O'Neill, who was a great teacher too, but everything I had, it was just, she taught you to dance. She came to class and she taught you to dance. But Maureen nurtured you and prepared you to become a teacher. And I mean, she was marvelous. She just prepared us for the whole thing.
Right.
And of course, years of experience.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, obviously the McTaggart family certainly has a great history in Cork, that's for sure. Absolutely, with Peggy and some of the others. Now, you continued to teach with and for Maureen then for a while.
Yeah, for a while. And then Maureen, they were moving from Firebaugh to another part, and I think she was trying to open her own school down there in the valley, down in the San Ramon, or the San Fernando Valley, or whatever they call that down there. So she just told me then that she felt like I deserved my own credit if I, to keep it up. And so I opened up the school.
So that was how that began.
That's how I began. But I worked for quite a while, maybe 5 or 6 years.
During the period of time that you were working with Maureen Hall, do you remember something about the costumes? Like what was it, the black and red that they typically have today, or was it something different?
I say her original costume, I think it was a royal blue with a white cord or something similar to that. But then later on, she decided, or her advanced group like us, for the figure dancing, she put us all in a velvet costume. But for some reason, she didn't have us all wear the same color.
Ah,
Everybody in the team had a different color dress, same dress, made in a different color.
ah.
And I remember we went up and did an 8-hand and we danced it and won it. And Dennis Dennehy, Lord, we go to him, commented it would have been better if we were more uniformed, but we were
Wearing the same dress. Yeah, there you go.
well, we had the same dress. We just mine was a mustard color and I hated it. But
All right.
later on she came out with different costuming. The black costume I think came later, the black with the red.
Yeah, and that was sort of the Cork traditional kind of thing. That yeah, as far as that goes.
That was
So
my costume.
so when the McBride School appears on the scene, it's called the McBride School of Irish Dance.
Right.
I'm sure.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how that went.
Well, it went very well. I went to the local parishes and the priests knew me by this time and they let me in and I started my own class in 67. And I started out with a green dress and a cream shawl with a harp and shamrock on it. And that was my start. And so
That was the basic look, huh? And were you teaching by yourself? Did you have any other helpers or assistants?
by myself for years and years and years.
While you were teaching by yourself, tell us a little bit about how your family was evolving.
Well, I ended up that I had 2 boys when I started up the school, and then Eileen came later. I remember taking taking her little playpen down to the dancing class and
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So some mothers remember Eileen being a baby in a playpen. You know.
So she was surrounded by the music and the dancing from the very earliest stage, obviously. But you kept going and bringing the kids with you and all that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, my
Absolutely.
kids. I mean, they were raised. Mom taught Irish dancing. They all knew that, and the boy they knew, and they didn't mind the social scene with the Irish dancers. They'd come to the parties, and they maybe would come to the feshes, but maybe not, and they'd stay with their father. And you know, when I
Sure.
in
So,
those days, I think I only taught on Saturdays for one day.
well, and that was fairly typical in those days. Classes were on the weekends when people could come and all that sort of thing. I was the same way. Our classes were only on a weekend, and then all of a sudden they moved to other days of the week and all that sort of stuff. So were there any more feshes growing at that stage of the game besides the Gaelic League fesh?
Yeah, they did start more feshes in. There was more feshes in Los Angeles than what we call Southern California versus Northern California. But in Northern California, there was the Gaelic League Fesh, which stayed there, right? And then we had an Irish American club in Santa Clara, which would be South Bay, East Bay, and that was called the Marin Irish. No, not the Marin, the Santa Clara Irish Club, and that later on, when you interview Sandra Green and all them, they inherited all of that later on.
I see. Okay.
But we had a fesh there, and then where else did we have a fesh? There was one time when we only had one fesh a year, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for kids to believe these days that we had a time when there were so few feshes going on in various places, including unusual places. Big cities, one thing, but even in small, like little communities in the southern region that have feshes going like 2 or 3 times a year, and I'm like, that wasn't common in those days. When I grew up, there was one fesh in Boston. It became 2, and that was kind of it for a long time, as far as that goes. Yeah.
We only had one fesh in San Francisco, and then when the Oireachtas got brought in to play, the Oireachtas dancers had the Oireachtas, but the beginners still only had the February fesh. So that's why when I decided to run a fesh, I started my first fesh in 1982.
My goodness, 1982.
It's 41 years this year.
Excellent.
When I started that fesh, I picked October, and I've never strayed from October.
Really?
And everybody says to me, why did you do that? And I said, the reason I did it is the little kids that had a fesh in February didn't have another fesh till the following February. But with my fesh being in the fall, even if you weren't Oireachtas material, you had a fesh.
You had another opportunity,
And
right? Sure.
that was why I did it that way.
Eh,
Though I thought the Oireachtas dancers had a feis prior to the Oireachtas.
sure. Now,
That was
did you have your feshes at schools or
started
colleges? And
off, they were in the Catholic schools, yeah. And it was quite a few years later that I graduated to the hotels. But you know, there was a time I had the Oakland Convention Center.
oh my goodness, wow.
But after Michael Flatley did Riverdance, I had 1,100 and some odd dancers at my feis.
Oh my goodness.
We started on a Friday night, and we went Friday nights all day, Saturday all day, Sunday, and we did all that. I had 132 adults in my adult competitions on a Friday night at the convention center after Riverdance.
My goodness, that's quite a record. Now,
Yeah,
tell me,
I-
who were some of the people that you brought out to judge those early feshes? Who were the folks that I'm assuming they were not from the area. Obviously, they're from other places, but
the very first feis I held had 200 and some odd dancers in it, and I had it in the Catholic Church in Concord, and there was one judge, and that was Patsy McLaughlin.
all right,
And Jimmy Early played the music.
excellent. So that was 1982 or something like that?
1982.
Wow.
And then Kathleen Daly held a feis then, I should mention that. Kathleen Daly, Lord be good to her. She held a feis, and she called it the Taltine Games.
Alton Games, right?
And she held it at St. Mary's College in Morocco. So in those days, remember, what was his first name? Carney? What was it?
Steve Carney. Yeah, Steve.
Carney.
My wife's dancing partner. Yeah.
Well, he was one of our first judges around here.
Okay.
A lot of them, and I'm sure I'll think of them after we're not talking.
Well, it's funny that you should mention the Talton Games because that was the very first feis I ever judged after getting my adjudicators.
Yeah,
Because
was outdoors.
you and Kathleen contacted me and said, could I come do the feis?
Yeah,
and could I stay and help you with some workshops?
Yeah.
So it was a productive week for me all the way around.
Real.
The Talton Games were beautiful. That college was lovely. It was a beautiful location. It was really nice.
Still a great college. It's well attended.
Yeah. When I judged there, I judged with Laureen O'Neill, James, and Tony Nolan, rest his soul. And I was completely overwhelmed by the whole experience because it was just dancers I didn't know, people I didn't know. It was great fun. It really was. It was excellent. That brings me to a question which I suspect is going to open the door to a lot of possibilities. I know that you have become close friends with loads of people in Irish dancing. And I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit, some of the people who have been friends of yours in Irish dancing that you've had out to judge, or they've had you to judge, or you've just become good friends. Who are the good buddies in the group that you remember so much your interactions with over the years?
Well, Michael and Noreen Smith. You could count yourself in that.
And Michael and Noreen were actually pupils of mine because when I was like a teenager, I was teaching them at our teacher's dance school. So I've known them since they were 4 years old.
Really,
we go back a ways.
You're going to share some time with them. They're coming to
Absolutely, yeah.
And Patsy McLaughlin, of course, is a long time friend of mine. The Yates, Breda Yates, and them from Portland.
Oh, right, of course, sure.
My
yeah.
daughter is a TC now, but I had that class for a while. I used to be their workshop teacher, but Sinead Yates and Breda Yates is a good friend of mine.
Lovely people.
I have a lot of good friends. Honestly, I know I'd leave somebody out if I tried to.
And I know you used to have some from England and Ireland, Danny Doherty and different ones would come out and all that. Yeah, on the sort of, they loved coming out to California because of the beauty of the place and the enjoyment, and they knew they were going to have a good crack with you.
Well, when we had after Riverdance, and we had up nearly 1,200 entries in the festival. I had 10 adjudicators and 8 musicians. So there's a lot of them that I'm not remembering.
That's a big old fest. You wouldn't get that these days, I suppose. But
and the Gaelic League in San Francisco, Sharon McSweeney, the Whaling Academy, they run that fest still till this day. And they assumed they took over, and they had that many entries as well. And
Yeah.
then you must have met a lady by the name of Martha Clark.
Oh yes,
Yeah, well,
Martha and Ellen.
yes, well, you'll see them. You'll see Martha at my fashion. She still likes to help once in a while.
Oh, cool. Very good. Yeah, they're
But
great. They're great fesh organizers. They really are.
Smith was another one that I knew very well. I knew lots of them. I just can't remember them all now.
When
Jimmy.
you think when you think
Oh,
about the way the dancing is these days,
oh
and
yeah.
obviously Riverdance has made a huge difference in its own way, as did Lord of the Dance. Um, what things have happened in dancing that you think you've noticed? What's different about dancing, say, from when you were dancing in Glasgow with Peggy O'Neill, or when you were first teaching in San Francisco? How has it changed?
Well, the funny thing about it, it's changed, but it hasn't. If it just depends. If you're not going to change Annie McBride that much. And I'm a traditional teacher, and then I'm going to give you the foundation the same way I gave it to you 40 years ago. That's
Exactly.
what I think has changed is the fact that it got more competitive, and it got we got into we didn't stray from tradition, but we added to it. I mean, there's a lot of theatrical moves and things like
Absolutely.
that I don't feel were there when we were young.
No, when you think back to the steps that you learned from Peggy O'Neill, they were basic, they were traditional, and they taught you all the basics and that sort of thing. And that's great. It's like the traditional sets. But at some point, people add a little trick. They add a little bit. They add a
You
little
know,
something from jazz or tap or ballet or the hands in the choreography and all that sort of thing.
right?
And it's just
It's
evolving. It's
more
growing.
dramatic today, isn't it? A little more dramatic today. But I
Absolutely.
still feel, and it works for me in a way, that you give them a couple of years of the tradition and the foundation, because they still have to have that. Because no matter what they do today, you can only do so much, but it still has to relate to what the foundation of the whole thing.
Well, you mentioned like the light jig, but that Peggy would teach. She would only teach a few steps because you want it to stay looking like a light jig.
Exactly.
There's some very basic moves and front kicks and 1, 2, 3, 4s and all that kind of stuff, and that's what the jig is supposed to be. And once you learn that, then you can do other things. I was always amazed that people didn't start with traditional hornpipes. They would go to Oraktaspeed hornpipes, and I'm like, but the kid needs the concept, the tradition is really important, the treble hop back and the pause beat and all that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Well, that's what I was telling. I have a good sized adult class, and even the senior girls, I tell them when we're doing shows, and I try to get them to do some of the traditional stuff, and or if the adults are having a special, and the special is the traditional hornpipe, I tell them, when I danced, there was no slow speed, there was no slow hornpipe and slow jig. That came later. As a matter of fact, when it did come, the kids, even not even just the teacher, the kids were all calling it the funny timing, because all different, from what and it was the speed of it. But you can understand why it was introduced, because the technical end of it, you were allowed to do a little bit more, and you couldn't have done that when it was mad fast in the tradition. I think
Sure.
it's I wish I was young again. I mean, I think it's great today what the kids can do.
I would agree. I remember dancing at a fairly quick speed in Boston when I was a kid, and then
Mhm.
seeing the McNiff dancers from New York, Joan McNiff and Peter and some
Mhm.
of the others, and thinking, wow, that's a whole different world. But it was great. It was a nice contrast. It was a bit of a difference, and I think that it's good for the kids to have both. They really do.
Yeah, oh, I definitely do. And if they don't have the foundation, they're not going to have that rhythm. They gotta get that rhythm. If the
Absolutely.
rhythm's not there, you may still win a prize, but will you get the first place prize if you don't work on that timing? You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I think you're right. The rhythmic timing, it can be really a challenge for some of the kids,
Mhm.
particularly with the more tricky material as far as that goes. So,
Exactly.
what are your plans for Irish dancing for the next couple of years? What do you see yourself doing?
Well, right now, before before the COVID, I was still had 6 different locations, and I'm down. I have a mainstay which we go to 3 days a week, and we have 2 other locations. So I'm kind of cutting back. I cut back last Thursday night. I was 45 years in the Marin County, and I started in 78, and I did my last class there last Thursday night. So
Oh my goodness.
I'm still a little nostalgic. But for me personally, I'm fortunate. I've got Eileen, and Eileen is, hopefully she'll keep it going when I'm done. But I still have my foot in the door because and I can call Eileen and say, I'm tired today, so I'm going to stay home, and she'll go in for me. She has a family and she has a full-time job. So we work it out together, and we have a good sized class, not as big as it was before COVID. A lot of people didn't come back, or a lot of them have graduated and gone on to college. Every year you lose some to college.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm not fully retired. I'm what you'd call semi-retired. So
A little here, a little there.
keep my nose in the door there because I like it. I was saying to them we just danced at the Scottish Games both days this weekend, and I was just saying I wish I was young again and see all these, and a lot of dancers that came through me through the Irish were doing Scottish dancing again this weekend because they thought they had outaged the Irish dancing.
I see.
You can come back for the adult guys. In fact, the adults are dancing more competitively now than they were before. So
There really is a big movement toward more adult dancing, isn't there, in certain parts of the country? And they have the championships of the North Americans and other things, and a lot of regionals now have an adult championship. So it's a different population, it's a different community. Yeah, absolutely.
I have
So
over 20 in my adult class. There's over 20 ladies in my adult
wow,
class.
good for them. Excellent. Good. More power to them. And Peg McTaggart used to say it was the best aerobic exercise you could get anywhere else in the world. And I think she was right about that. All right. So if I were going to say to you, what do you want to be remembered for, Annie McBride, in the world of Irish dancing? What do you want people to remember about you?
Well, first of all, I think I would just want them to know that I love Irish dancing, still do. I feel it's a fantastic exercise and activity for any and all that decide to join it. They'll see more of the world being an Irish dancer, and they'll meet more people being an Irish dancer. But for me personally, all the friends that it was my whole life. I loved it then, I love it now. I really think that people will complain here and there about this or that, and I'll say it's not Irish dancing that's the problem. It's some of the people in the Irish dancing. So you gotta get people who really want to dance, who enjoy the dance, and taking a child from knowing nothing and then watching them develop into a good dancer. And that's my reward.
I would 100% agree with you. That's what's wonderful. Well, Annie McBride, I originally thought we would perhaps do this in small segments. We've obviously done it in one complete running conversation, and it was really, really good. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your history and your background with us. And we hope that you have many, many more years of continuing to teach Irish dancing in San Francisco and having feshes and doing all kinds of fun stuff. And I do understand that you are quite the singer, as I recall.
Oh,
And
God.
that you also do enjoy going to the slot machines occasionally at the odd casino. Is that?
I'd be taking a rest from them.
Well, Annie, thank you so much.
All
God
right.
bless. Thank you so much for sharing with, and thank you for being a storyteller for the North Americans. Thank you.